I wanted to start by just delving a bit into the backstory of your life, because you've always been, haven't you, a performer ever since you were a kid, basically appearing in your family's front room on the fireplace on the hearth there,
Yeah.
performing. This is where the seeds were planted, wasn't it, for this career in music?
Yeah, yeah. That's what it was. I was one of those kids that liked to jump around and pretend I was a rock star at a very young age. And somebody in the family said, "Well, there's a piano there in the living room. Why don't you get him some lessons?" And so, like many kids, I didn't really take to it. I didn't like the formality of it, and the kinds of things that the lady was teaching me. And so it didn't really take very well. So maybe a year or two later, I saw an electric guitar at a yard sale, and I thought that's it. That's more my speed. And
You had
so
to persuade your father, though, didn't you? Because he was like, listen, you didn't do anything with the piano. If I buy you the guitar, are you going to be playing it?
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And it's exactly what happened. And I had to convince them. So ultimately, they bought the guitar that day. It was, something cheap. And so we went to the local guitar teacher, and he said, "Listen, I can teach your son, but I can't teach him on this because it's not playable." We didn't know what we were buying, of course. And so then later on, we went to the music store and got a proper instrument, something.
Gibson Marauder, didn't you?
That's
Was
right.
it Gibson Marauder?
Yeah, a Gibson Marauder, and it was a maroon colored guitar, and that was what I learned on until they realized, okay, a couple years in, they realized that I really took well to it, and they got me something much nicer. They actually went to the store to buy me as a present for Christmas a Les Paul, and the guy that worked at the store convinced them to buy this Yamaha, which is the guitar that Santana played at the time. It was the SG 2000. They made a 2000, 3000, and I ended up with a 3000 as well a few years later. But I was almost a Les Paul guy, but it didn't go that way.
It was a mic stand, wasn't it? And a small PA. That was the first bit of kit that you actually had, wasn't it,
Yeah.
when you're down there. So the singing gene was also there from a very early age. Although,
Yeah. What happened though? What happened was that I was always, when I got into working with people, like my first band, I met a kid who was a few years older than me, and we formed a band at school. And his singing voice, he was more evolved than I was as a singer. So although I did sing, he was better than me. So I just kind of would defer. And then after that band sort of expanded, and the other members that came in were really, really strong singers. And so, I was, out of the 5 people that were in the group, I was the weakest singer. And so I didn't really focus on it very much. And then once that disbanded, then I started taking singing more seriously. And then obviously it became a priority for me.
hey, tell me, did you ever find that photograph of you dressed up as a rocket with the long black hair and the
It's
plastic guitar?
somewhere, I feel like it's somewhere in this house in a collage that I might have hanging somewhere, you know. I
Yeah,
feel like it's somewhere closer than I may realize, but I haven't gone looking for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, you're growing up in a house. It sounded like it was there was a house full of music, but it was interesting because your mother was the rock person in the house. She'd seen Hendrix, she'd seen the Stones, and she'd seen the Beatles, and it was your dad who was into the Philly soul music.
Yeah, he was more into, Percy Sledge and the soul, the soul tunes, R&B songs, and my mom was a rocker. Neither one of them played instruments. No one in my family that I'm aware of were musicians. Although my great grandfather, he came from Italy to Pennsylvania when he was 16, and somewhere along the line he bought a guitar, and it was an acoustic guitar. And my mother said he played Italian folk songs for her. So I guess he was somewhat musically inclined, but I didn't grow up around musicians. It's just something I gravitated towards, you know.
That first gig that you went to, I mean, you're listening to Philadelphia radio a lot. And I mean, this was a big thing because Stevie Wonder is a legend. I mean, you know, so getting to see him as pretty much your first gig, and then following that with George Benson, again, another incredible talent. Some of it, I've got some of his live stuff, and it's quite sensational to actually sit there and listen to. So you had as your first intros into live events, two huge acts. What effect did those have on you?
Right. So that's the first two concerts that I remember going to were those two. I mean, separately, they were not on the same bill, but I remember going to see Stevie Wonder, and it was in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. The stage turned in a circle, and then shortly thereafter we saw George Benson, and it must have been around the Talking Book album, or maybe it had to have been a little bit after that. But that album was a really important album for me as a youngster. And then obviously George, you know, that was a very impactful concert. And then shortly after that, a few years later, I got into more heavier music, and I became an Iron Maiden fan. And
yeah, wasn't it Allentown? Wasn't the gig that you saw them on that tour?
I was just going to say, yeah. So we went to the Allentown Fairgrounds, which is in Pennsylvania, and not far from where I was born. I was born in Reading, so it's just a neighboring town. And I saw Iron Maiden, and that was my first, you know, proper hard rock concert.
I mean, again, must have left you with some indelible memories. But your rise to stardom. I mean, if people are looking back at this, a completely different time, completely different eras. No social medias, no internet, no nothing. So for you to get a piece in Guitar Player magazine featuring in this spotlight section, you're 17 years of age, especially considering where you're from, with all of the amazing players that are out there. Somebody clearly saw something very special in you at a really early age.
Yeah, and I was very lucky, and that person's name is Mike Varney, and he is a very important figure in the guitar community. He discovered Yngwie Malmsteen and Paul Gilbert and many, many great, extraordinary guitar players. And there was a movement at the time back then. There was a movement in the rock guitar community that Shrapnel Records was at the front of. And so to get recognized or even signed, you know, getting recognized was the column you're talking about in Guitar Player magazine, where every month they take 3 guys from around the world and they feature them. So I was featured there, like you said, which was really, you know, something that was amazing, an amazing thing that happened for me. And then ended up making a couple of records for the label. So that was the path. And for me, that was a way out of, you know, despite the fact that I wasn't far, you know, in distance from Philadelphia, which was a major city. I was, you know, a kid, and, you know, I was an hour's drive, you know, out in the farmland, you know, so it was a great opportunity to get worldwide recognition. You know, I was very fortunate for that, but I also worked very hard for it. You know, I was persistent in sending the music there, and when I thought there was a chance to make an album on the label, I would send music every week. He would get something new from me because I really was focused on getting to a point where I could make my own record. That was always my goal, was to write and record and release my own music. My objective was never to join someone else's group. I always wanted to be the group. I wanted to, you know, write the music, get the deal, you know, make the album, and go play live, you know, against the album. So that was my objective the whole way through.
The vocal influences, you mentioned Mike Varney. It was he who suggested you go away, wasn't it, and record a song, a free song. So you went away and did Fire and Ice, didn't you? But your
Fire and Water.
Fire and Water, Fire and Ice. Fire and Ice was the Poison one, wasn't it?
Yeah. One of my songs. Yeah.
The influences, not only Paul Rodgers, but Rod Stewart, and this might surprise a few people as well. Terence Trent D'Arby was another one.
Yeah, that was you know, so when on my second album, I knew right away that I did not want to make another instrumental record. I knew that during the process of making the instrumental record, I became very aware that this is not the kind of music that I want to make. Because prior to that, you know, I was in a band that we were writing together, and I was writing songs. I was writing lyrics with the, you know, I wrote the lyrics on my own, and then I gave them to the guy to sing. And so we made this EP back then before I got my deal. So then I'm in this world making this instrumental music and quickly realizing, well, this is a whole other thing. I don't feel super passionate about instrumental music as I thought I would. So I told I told Mike Varney, the head of the label, I really want to make a record where there's singing, you know. And that was him who said, well, that's fine. He said, but if you're going to do it, I think you should sing. So he was the one that encouraged me to take the singing more seriously. And so then it was about, well, what do you like? Who do you like? Well, you know, I like early Rod Stewart. I like the way Paul Rodgers sings. And so I tried to emulate those guys. But, you know, you brought up Terence Trent D'Arby. That was one of the first times where I heard someone sing, and it just floored me. It blew me away because it had all the soul stuff that I grew up listening to, but there was this edge to it, this rock, aggressive edge. And that was probably one of the first guys that I really tried to emulate when I was really young. When that record came out, I think that came out in '89, maybe. And
I had the massive hit, didn't he? Sign Your Name.
Yeah. Right. And so he and I have become, he changed his name. Speaking of names, he changed it to Sananda Maitreya, but he and I have become friends, which is very, very interesting because I remember, you know, when he, shortly after that record came out, I moved to LA. Interscope signed me to a major deal, and they moved me to Los Angeles when I was 20 or 21. And, I walk into my friend's house, and he was sitting on the sofa, and you know, he was a huge star and a huge influence. And I was like, oh my God, what is he doing here? You know, and well, my friend had just gotten the gig playing guitar behind him, Stevie Salas, who you probably have heard of.
Yeah.
Stevie and I are great friends, and we, you know, would see a lot of each other back then. And I walk in, and he's sitting there, and I got in this like frenzy. And I ran back to my car, and I was carrying with me, for whatever reason, a couple of the demo tapes that got me signed by Jimmy Iovine and Tom Wiley, that got me signed to Interscope. And so I ran in with the tape. I started talking to Terence, and I said, here's my tape. And I told him how much of a fan I was. And it was such a crazy moment, but it really changed me, is that he took the tape, and he looked, and he goes, why do you want me to have this? And he handed it back to me. He said, I'm not going to listen to it. And even if I did, it's not going to change anything for you. And I looked at him. I was like, right. Yeah, right. I get it. So I put the tape away, and we sat there and watched the national, you know, it was lions feeding, you know, on TV, the Geographic channel, which is what Stevie would always watch before we'd get ready to go out to the club, you know, because that's why I was there. We were going to go out, you know, and so it was just this crazy moment of like, oh yeah, you're right. There's no reason for me to play this. I mean, if you hear it, you like it, you do, you don't, whatever. Nothing really shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what you know what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, you know, it's like people want to give, you know, you give the tape, you know, like, oh, listen to what I'm doing. It's like, well, why? Why do you want me to hear it? If I don't like it, you know, it's perfectly possible that I might not like it. then you're going to hate me and think, it's personal. It becomes personal. And if I do like it, I'm not a record company. I'm not an A&R executive. I can't do anything for you. The business is effed up enough, trying to be an artist and do things for yourself. I wouldn't know what to do. So anyway, it was just this kind of aha moment of like, yeah, I don't really need to play this for anybody.
So all the headlines were about this amazing guitar talent. But as a songwriter as well, you were emerging from your shell. And some people might not know this and others might have forgotten about it, but Fever Dream, you ended up getting Fever Dream included on the soundtrack for Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Now, again, a lot of people might not remember the film or who have a clue who Bill and Ted is, but at the time, that was a massive worldwide box office smash hit. So how did you feel when you have one of your compositions in the band? And did you ever get a chance to play with the Wild Stallions?
Well, no, I'll tell you what happened. So that was right around the time where Interscope bought my contract from Shrapnel. Part of the deal was I would agree to give Shrapnel one more instrumental record, which is the record Electric Joy. Now, a lot of people don't know that record, normally I wouldn't have made that record, but that was done in order to fulfill an obligation and move on to the major recording contract in which I was going to make a record that I was singing on, the carryover of Fever Dream. And so the song Dream of a New Day was on the Fever Dream record. Interscope had the soundtrack rights. So if you see the soundtrack, you'll see on there, Kiss is on there. I think Steve Vai might be on there. A lot of major acts. And then you'll see my name on there, which I was relatively, unknown outside the guitar community. So that was a great opportunity. I remember I went to the premiere and did the red carpet with Edgar Winter. Edgar Winter and I shared a limo. Nobody knows this. See, this is new stuff coming out. We shared a limo because he and I were writing together for my Interscope record. So I was writing with Dwayne Hitchings, who wrote Do You Think I'm Sexy? Robert Hazard and I wrote a lot of songs together, 4 songs we wrote. He wrote Girls Just Want to Have Fun for Cyndi Lauper. And then Edgar and I wrote a song called Head Over Heels that is somewhere in an office, probably who knows where. And so we went to the premiere together, did the red carpet, and then we actually performed that night. And I performed Free Ride in Frankenstein, I believe it was. And that was the night that I met Eddie Van Halen for the first time. And I have a picture hanging in my hallway with the 3 of us, Edgar Winter, me, Eddie Van Halen.
Amazing.
And that was like a real, I had just moved to LA. So that was a real welcome to Hollywood. And the other thing I remember vividly, I remember getting out of the car with Edgar Winter. Keanu was already on the red carpet, and I walked up. I was standing behind Keanu Reeves at this point, and he was wearing a brown jacket. I remember exactly what he was even wearing. And a couple people knew who I was, and I heard my name yelled, and I turned, and they took a few pictures of me. And I remember my record company executive making fun of me. He says, "You look like a deer in the headlights," because I just had this look of bewilderment, on my face, because here I was thrown in the mix, and somewhere online, I think that I see that picture come up now and then. I'm wearing a very funny jacket. Anyway, that was an awesome memory, and the very beginning, that was me coming to LA, and I didn't come to LA like looking for work. I came in, right at the top of the food chain, behind the scenes, of course. But it was just real surreal, very interesting.
I mean, it's amazing, really, because you've been in LA for not very long. You turn up, you've got Terence Trent D'Arby sat in your house. You're on the red carpet. I mean, were you beginning to think this is all a bit easy? everything's falling into place.
It's a very good point you're making. What I noticed, what I was putting together up until that point, and it wasn't until at the end of it wasn't until the end of 94 where I realized, where I had some cold water thrown on my face. But what it was I thought, if I work really hard, as long as I really keep working hard, good things will happen. And so, I worked really hard in my early teens to learn the guitar. And then I worked really hard to get noticed by Shrapnel. And then I really focused on my singing. And then I really focused on songwriting. And then I got the major recording contract with Interscope because of all that work and the focus on songwriting. It was the songs that got me the deal. It wasn't anything other. There were two songs I had. There was a song called You Got a Fire and a song called Angie, which later I put on a record many years later. But those songs and the Fever Dream album got me my deal. So it was always about the songs. And then it was that experience. That deal went south. So there was some turbulence after that. They dropped me from the deal. But I immediately got back on my feet with Geffen. I got signed to Geffen and put an album out in 94. And so, it was a little turbulence, but where it really came to a screeching halt was that Geffen album after it was made, and we put our heart and soul into making it.
This is Mother's Head Family Reunion,
yeah. After the record was made, John Kolodner was the guy that signed me, who was very important to Aerosmith. And when Aerosmith,
just a bit.
He was in all the videos too. He was the guy in white in all the videos and the beard. When Aerosmith moved to Sony, they took John along. When John went to Sony, he didn't take me along. And so I was stuck at Geffen in a time where, Kurt Cobain had just committed suicide. I mean, it was a lot of turmoil, a lot of heavy stuff. And, my album was just kind of swept under the rug. It was just like, well, I had nobody at the label saying, well, wait a minute, I signed this kid. We're going to do this, that, and the other. It was just like, all right, we got big problems here. We got to figure out our next direction. And so, that happens to a lot of artists where you get a major recording contract, you make a great record, and something out of your hands happens. And it just and I remember sitting with one of the guys at Geffen saying, listen, I'm sorry, we're going to let you out of your contract. And we're going to print a couple copies to release it to fulfill our side, but we're not going to market it. And unfortunately, that's what happened to me. So all through the 90s, it was really rough. So this whole impression of coming into LA with a bang, maybe I did, but then I had a good solid, 10 years of fuck, And the thing that was really strange was that I had accumulated a lot of money because the Interscope deal, the Geffen deal, the Warner Brothers publishing deal. So I was kind of set up, where I didn't have to hustle financially. However, career-wise, it was fucking depressing. I couldn't get arrested. And then finally the internet came along and I was like, okay, I can release my own music and I can do it my way and I can have a voice out there. And that's when everything started I got the plane off the ground again,
Because you tasted the mega band sort of with Poison.
And there's that. I left that out. Of course there was that.
The story I loved about that was the fact that you used to have the covers band that you were playing in when you were obviously growing up. When it came to Poison, it was the one band you refused to play any of their stuff because they were so uncool.
I can't believe you brought that up. It was a very interesting thing at the time with the cover band. I was really into the guitar at that point. I mean, I was in that 85, 86, whenever their first album came out. I was listening to Alan Holdsworth, and Steve Morse with the Dixie Dregs. So I wasn't interested in any of those, any of those kinds of bands from that era. It wasn't just, Poison. It was any band that was in that
genre. Yeah.
Right. Because I was, like I said, you know what I was listening to. So fast forward, 6 years later, if it was 85, 86, well, whenever it was, let's say 5 for argument's sake, I'm in Brett's house, the singer from Poison. And it was Interscope. They were the ones that said, hey, listen, he's calling us. We're dropping you. We're letting you out of your contract because I was at creative odds with my record company. And I was very stubborn at 20 years old. And they said, okay, well, we're going to let you out of the contract. And their attitude was, you're going to get another deal, but, you're not going to make the record we want you to make, so we're going to let you go. But before you do anything, go out to Brett's house and have a meeting, because he's been calling about you. And that's exactly how I ended up in Poison. And he, I said, well, I don't think I want to join someone else's band. You know, I'm me. I'm already on the path of being me. And I said, well, the label's attitude was, you're young. I don't think you have your direction set yet. And this is the label talking to me. Of course, I didn't believe that. This is, so at very least, go talk to him. You never know. So I went to his house. And once I started speaking with him about music, I realized, wow, well, actually, I have a lot in common with this guy. He's a Pennsylvania guy.
Yeah.
And the bands he was talking about were bands that I liked. You know, he was talking about the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner and some soulful rock and roll. And then he said to me, you know, really, I'm not looking for a guy to come here and play a lot of notes. I need a guy that can write with me. You know, he said, you know, Cece was a songwriter. You know, I'm a songwriter. He's talking about himself. And he said, and I know that you're a songwriter, and I think you would be a good fit for where I see my band going. So at that point, then I was intrigued, you know, and so that's how I ended up in the band. And so the songs that are on that album, there's a couple songs on there that I had written previously that I brought in and he embellished upon. Stand being one of them, Fire and Ice being another,
which is the huge hit. Wasn't when he first heard those songs? It was at your audition, wasn't it? There was a few problems at the audition. You had a problem with the amp.
Oh my God!
Smoke coming out the amp.
I had a 50 watt. I still have it too. It works now, but I had a 50 watt Marshall. It wasn't a plexiglass panel, but it was right when they switched off of it, so it still had that same kind of sound. You know, the 4 input. It's a great sounding amp, and I showed up with it, and immediately smoke started coming out. And then they wanted me to play some of their songs, obviously. And the truth of the matter was, you know, I was pretty cocky back then at my age. Not cocky, but confident. So when it came time to learn the songs, I don't think I even picked up the guitar. I think I played it. You know, I was living in LA and I had a place, and I played the song on a loop, you know, the 4 songs that they wanted me to learn. I played them on loop, and I could hear, oh, I know what this is. You know, that's A, that's G, D. You know, there's a riff there. I know what I can tell with that. I might have picked up the guitar once or twice just to reconfirm. And so I walked in the audition feeling like, you know, I know this. I got to hear it on the radio. I know how it goes. Well, once I get in there and start playing it, I'm like, you know, oh shit, that ain't where the bridge goes. There's another verse here. You know, I start messing up. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really fucking up this audition. The amp went up. I don't know their music properly. So then he says to me, well, you got some originals. And the way I remember is I played him Stand, because I had that was written. That song was written. And then when I got in the band, he wanted to change up the lyrics and the verses. And so we did. And then I think he and I added a bridge to it coming into the solo. But that, you know, chorus, verse, I had my own set of lyrics that I think I use my lyrics to this day when I do the song. Or maybe I use a combination. Who cares? Who knows? But anyway, that was played. And then I played him the verse and chorus to what became Fire and Ice. I'm convinced that was the moment that he was able to go to the other 2 guys and convince them that I was the guy. Because I don't think they were convinced at that point. I think they said, who is this fucking clown? The amp exploded. He doesn't know our songs. Get him out of here. Yeah. But, you know, Brett went to bat for me. And then I remember I was rehearsing with him for 2 weeks, learning stuff, writing, messing around. And I didn't know if I was in the band or not. And here's the other bit I'll tell you that I never told this, which is very funny. We're sitting, they had their own room out in the valley, and we're sitting there. And Brett starts saying, all right, well, let's have a conversation. Now, I don't know it, but he's going to tell me that I have the gig. But I don't know that. He starts talking, and the way he's talking, I start anticipating that he's going to tell me it was a nice lunch and I'll see you later. So I interrupt him. I say, hey, listen, I said, I know I'm probably not your guy. You know, So I start getting ready to pack my shit up and leave. And he goes, no, wait. He says, that's not what I'm saying. He says, what I'm saying is, how do you feel like about headlining arenas and making millions of dollars? That was his quote to me. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, huh? Because you got the gig. You're in the fucking band. That's what he's finally. He's like, you're in the fucking band. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, then, everybody hugged everybody, and that was it. But that's a story I never told. Hopefully, people are interested in that.
Of course they will. But since then, obviously, the success is everywhere else. We had Mr. Big, we had the Winery Dogs, and latterly the link up with Adrian Smith. Yeah. But solo work is what you always gravitate to. And your quote is, I always focus on what I control. So it always draws you back. Regardless of how big the bands are, it's always back to the most important thing for you, which is your solo work.
Yeah, sure. It is. I mean, because everything else I've learned is out of my hands. And so it's been proven to me because of what happened on that early recording contract that we discussed. And it happened a second time on a major label recording contract with Geffen. So I know that no matter how, you could write the greatest song in the world, literally, but if you don't have the mechanism behind you to let the rest of the world know, it's out of your control. And so that's when, like I said, and back then you had to have, a deal. There were gatekeepers, and there still are these gatekeepers that, make things go a certain way. So what can I control? What can I do? Well, if I make, at the very least, if I make the music that I want to make the way that I envision it, then I've done my best. I've done my job. Anything that happens beyond that is a bonus. Because, on the flip side, I could hear someone's voice saying, yeah, but, if you hire this producer and if you listen to this and you do that and then you do this and maybe that guy gets involved. And then it's like, you can do all that. And then you can end up with something that doesn't represent you whatsoever, with the anticipation of it being a massive success. And it can still be an epic failure. And now you've got an epic failure with something that you don't even have any heart and soul into. Or even worse, it could be a massive success, and now you feel like a fraud because there's nothing, it's not really you're invested in it emotionally. So who cares? So then that's why I operate the way I do. I make my own records the way I want. Thankfully, I have a group of people that care about what I create, and I love that, and I share that with them, and it's like a nice community. And that's the way it's set up,
Your work rate is utterly prolific. Now, if the numbers are right, and I was counting these earlier on, Nomad, which is where we're at today, will be the 90th album. 90th album. I mean, it's quite incredible that you have featured on since Arthur's Museum, that EP, back in 1988. So that includes obviously the collaborations and compilations and the odd live album here and there. But 90 albums.
I mean, holy hell.
I mean, you obviously know how busy you've been, but were you aware of the number?
No.
And how much work you actually done?
No, I thought you were going to say, this is because I don't even know if Nomad is my 22nd, 23rd, 24th album. I have no idea because there's albums that I put out, like the Wilson Hawk record, technically could be a solo record, but it's collaborative. Yeah. So I don't know how to even quantize all this shit. But that number is pretty crazy. That I didn't realize. But there you go. I mean, and here's the thing that's really interesting. On the outside, it must seem like I'm always doing something. The fact of the matter is I go months without even touching the guitar, without even doing anything musical. I'll be outside planting a tree or, building a shed or, screwing with a miter saw, putting up crown molding somewhere in a room. But it's very interesting. That's an interesting number.
So the album, I mean, fusion, this word that is bandied around an awful lot. I mean, it's almost like, isn't it, seeking this holy grail, the ability to blend multiple genres into basically one being. Now, many people have tried to do this over the years, and most of them don't succeed. But you plainly do. And, you know, you've only got to listen to any one of your albums to know that. But this even more so, you know, 8 tracks, 35 minutes. It has absolutely everything. So what is your secret to making this fusion actually work?
Well, that is a mystery, you know, and that has been a beautiful thing for me and a nightmare for me. Where it has been a nightmare is in certain aspects of dealing with record companies early on, where, you know, I would hear things like literally, "Oh, your voice, you sound too black." That's something that was said to me when I was very, very young.
Wow.
Yeah, some very crazy, crazy shit. And so this business of me being influenced by soul R&B and then also having a hard rock side, for me, feels completely natural. You know, at the core of what I'm doing, at the very base of it, everything is stemming from a soul funk sort of thing. So Parliament Funkadelic, Sly and the Family Stone, you know, and a few others. It's stemming from that. That's the root of my writing. And then everything branches out into, maybe I'll be a little jazzy. I like to play loud, so there's the rock thing. The rock music that I like is stuff that is influenced from the stuff I just described. So if I like a rock band, like the Black Crowes for me, love that.
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from. You know, I love what Lenny Kravitz does. You know, there's a list of a certain kind of rock music that I connect with. Another kind of rock music, I don't. It goes completely over my head. It doesn't make me move my head. I don't want to move my body when I hear it. It's just like, you know. So it's just the makeup of, by listening to what I listened to when I write, that's what comes out. It just comes out that way. And so I have this pendulum swing. You know, I can get a little heavy, you know, like my song Cheap Shots that opens the record. You know, that's about as hard hitting as I'll probably get, you know. And then, you know, you'll hear a song like Nihilist that ends the record, where I'll kind of go into this almost progressive rock thing, because I do have a bit of that in my DNA as well, you know. So there's a pendulum swing. What you probably won't hear is a real, you know, straight up country thing coming out of me. You know, you probably won't hear pedal steel in my music. You probably won't hear, an accordion in my songs, you know. But, you know, you might hear some horns here and there, like I did on, you know, on the Wilson Hawk album. So, you know, I'm not doing it. It's not a mess. It's not some random potpourri. It's actually a very defined thing, you know.
Yeah.
Sound, it's what I do. And the beautiful thing about the Nomad album, for my taste, is the album was created onto itself. I didn't know I was going to release it on a major label. I didn't know any of that. I just was making something for me. I was making something for myself that was in me, and I wanted to hear it come out of the speakers in a certain way. And that's what I did. And I listened, I was like, yeah, that's what I was thinking about. That was in me. You know, that I was dreaming about this, and now it exists, and now I can share it. And there you go. It's that. I hate the word organic, because it's what the fuck does it even mean? But it's the simplicity in it is what I just described.
From a musical consumer's point of view, for the people that go out to buy records, and I still go out and buy stuff. I mean, the album really is this sort of festival of musical fusions, and the beauty is you could listen to this 10 times in a row, and on every song you'll hear something different each time you listen to it. And that's it's not usual. Yeah, be it the, I don't know, the lyric, you might pick up on the lyric, or you might pick up on the guitar, or suddenly the bass will become more prominent, or it will be the groove. So literally every time you listen, you hear something new.
Awesome. Well, I thank you, man. I mean, I think, you know, I really I dig what your perception on it. it really, what you're saying is, you know, all I could ask for, you know, as far as someone talking about the album, how do they see it? You know, I really appreciate that, because that, you know, it's just my little vision. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's 8 songs. It's not, I'm not out there trying to do anything other than, you know, get this stuff out so I can say, oh yeah, let me hear it back. You know, you know what I mean? That's all it is.
As you're playing again on everything that's on there, again, there's a big pressure on you to match the quality of each input. So the lyrics have got to be as good as the voice, there's got to be as good as the drums, there's got to be as good as the guitar. So how do you cope if one of your personas is having an off day? How does one part of you tell the other, this isn't good enough, or well, this is brilliant?
There's okay, so this whole thing, this perception of perfection is just a perception, because to me, it's about the progress of the situation and not about, you know, the perfection of it, because that's where you get something that ends up being untrue, because you're not perfect. You know, no matter how hard you tweak yourself, you're never perfect. You know, you're a person, and people have imperfections. So the music is the same way. If you were to, like the other day, I was listening to Nomad because I made a music video for it, and I pulled up the Pro Tools session, and I just wanted to hear the guitar soloed for a second, because it's been over a year since I played it. And I'm listening to the guitar track. I'm like, oh shit, there was like a couple things that I played that were flubbed. Now, you don't notice it when you hear the entire picture. It works, and it has a vibe, and it has a feeling. But if you isolate something, you're like, oh shit, I didn't really finger that chord perfectly on that one moment. But you hear that on records. You can hear that, you know, on Van Halen records. You know, the greatest guitar player ever recorded in rock and roll. So, you know, that perfection thing. What's perfection to me is the emotion that I feel when I sit back and say, wow, I got to hear that again. And then I'm like, fuck, that's badass. That's done. Don't touch it. It's done. That's the perfection. It's not, oh, the drums are perfectly aligned, and that's madness. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, that's people that do that stuff. I want to smack them in the back of the head and say, yeah, what about the song? Is the song any good? You know, I mean, you know what I mean? And so to really go deeper into that, and I know I've got probably another guy that I'm making late here. I don't want to stop talking to you, because this is you're really pulling this out of me very well. But, you know, the most important thing in the music that I make is not the guitar. It's not the drums. They're all very important, but it's the bloody lyric. What am I saying? What am I singing about? Who is this character? What, you know, what's the story? You have to know all that shit. Otherwise,
so what is the story? What is the story? I will let you go. What is the story? Because if you look at, take some of the track titles, Nihilist, for example, somebody, who basically believes that life is meaningless and doesn't conform to any moral or religious value, has none of that. Where are you in that? Is this you?
No, I mean, I don't live my life that way. So I mean, sometimes I have to adopt some of that attitude in certain situations. Otherwise, you would be driven to madness by people. But you know, that song in particular, it's about a situation where someone has just worn you to a point where you just like, you throw your hands up and you just it's okay. You know, what do I know? I mean, it's like, what do I care? You know, no. You're bringing this out of me. You've brought me down to a level where there's no more gas in the tank. Whatever will bloody be. You know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, I do.
You've got me down to the bottom level, and doesn't matter. You know,
a nomad. You know, Nomad, the album title. So you're talking again, you've given it the title of somebody that is constantly traveling, moving from one place to the next, new pastures, etc. Again, is this your life journey or is this your musical journey?
Well, it's not necessarily my musical journey. It's more about, you know, the motion of life. You know, the worst, a very scary thing is just, you know, everything just remains the same day after day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
And I suppose there's a beauty in that, and maybe I'll find that, you know. But you know, I've always had this element of, okay, now what? Okay, now what are we gonna do? Okay, that's done. What's next? You know.
Yeah.
So
that's actually a good point, because when you look at your career to date and all of the achievements that you've had, is there something that you would like to still accomplish, something that has eluded you in the music business?
Well, I mean, you know, I've never, the more shallow thing I could say would be like the what comes along with like a real hit record, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, okay, well, the record is being played on all these radio stations, and, you know, the late night television shows all want you to play this song. You know, I had a taste of that with Poison. I mean, we did, you know, we did the Leno and Arsenio and all and that stuff, and the song was on the radio, and it was number 4 on MTV's Most Wanted. So I mean, I had a taste of that at a very, 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 very young age, which I think is probably the best time to have a taste of that, if you're going to have a taste at all. When you're young, you got your energy, you got your looks, you know, you got it all. So that's beautiful. So now that I talk about all this, I did experience a bit of that. I don't really know how to answer your question. I don't know. You know, I mean, 90 appearances later, I don't know. It's pretty blurred. I guess I don't know how to answer that.
And lastly, then, is there somebody that you would love to collaborate with that doesn't know that you would love to collaborate with them? It might be something that, you know, you've never said to anybody. You know, I've asked this question to many people, and you do get some bizarre answers. I mean, Michael Schenker was desperate to do something with Rod Stewart. Believe it or not, and Carmine Appice wanted to drum with the Police.
Right.
So was there anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's people that I know that I think it would be fun to work with. You know, I mean, I'm good friends with Jerry Cantrell, and he and I have talked over the years casually. Yeah, we got to do something. We got to write a song. And you know, we never did. So I mean, that's something that would be interesting. You know, Sananda Maitreya, who you know is Terence Trent D'Arby. We were talking earlier. He obviously changed his name 20 years ago. He and I have become friends. You know, he does his own thing, and I do my own thing. But you know, down the line, be interesting. You know, to do something. You know, I don't know what it would be. You know, but you know, there are people that you know, Justin Hawkins from The Darkness. Sent me a song last year that was incredible. I mean, this song, I was like, how the hell did you write this? I mean, it was really brilliant. And he wanted a guitar solo on it. And I did this crazy guitar solo with a hollow body and a clean sound, because he had these chord changes that were really kind of angular and just brilliant, that he weaved a melody through it. So so that was fun. So there are people, you know, they exist that I just don't sit around and think about it, you know, too much.